The Search. Hello, I would like to introduce myself. My name is Brey Williams, and this is my narrative story as told to me by my mother and her grandfather before her. I often wondered why my mother and grandfather spoke little about my great-grandfather. I was just 6 years old when he passed away and seldom visited with him. He lived alone on a hill in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by his growing fields of nothing and a little shabby white house in desperate need of repair. He spoke little, and what he did say was to the point and no more. He was a Native American man with dark graying hair that fell just over his ears and a dark complexion filled at every wrinkle on his face. There was an air of secrecy about the older man I knew as Gigi, short for great-granddad. I was never really sure about him until I was older and started to ask questions. At first, Mom told me little. One raining Sunday afternoon, and I was bored, I started gazing through albums of baby pictures of myself and onto pictures of the past. Mom sat down beside me and began to reminisce. I asked about a picture of the long, dark-haired lady who held the face of a Holly Hobbie doll. She was beautiful even in the old black and white photo. Mom went on to tell me about the great-grandmother I had never known. Gigi and my great-grandmother had met in the 7th grade and were a couple from that time on. After they turned 18, they immediately were married in a small ceremony. 3 years later, they had 2 sons, Preston and Troy, barely 2 years apart. The eldest Preston was my grandfather. The boys grew and the family was happy on the small salary that Gigi made farming and the great-grandmother made at local library, but the love they had for each other was like none my grandfather had ever seen before that or after. Gigi had to go out of town to a farming convention for 4 days and left then 10 and 12-year-old boys along with great-grandmother to run the farm. Not much to do, Gigi had told grandmother, just feed and water the livestock every day. Gigi reassured her that he would be safe and that all would go well. After all, they had never been apart for more than a day in all their marriage. Gigi kissed great-grandmother goodbye and hugged the boys. They stood at the long drive and watched him pull away in the old Ford pickup. The first 2 days were busy for the young woman and the boys just trying to keep up with the feeding of animals and the boys' homework. Great-grandmother took the week off at the library to maintain the farm. On a Saturday in the midday of the 3rd day Gigi had been gone, a heavy storm came out of the south that whistled through the trees with an echoing howl. Great-grandmother had just finished feeding the cattle when she noticed pregnant Daisy was missing from the herd. She ran, beat down on her rain hat so hard it began to poke holes in the top lining. She decided to start dinner to take a look for Daisy after dinner. This was really the storm of the early spring and season, and rain was much needed. As great-grandmother walked to the barn to the house, the wind blew the chicken's feed bucket from her hands. She kept the bucket inside till it was full of dinner peels to feed the chickens the next day. After dinner, the boys were chored with household tasks. Great-grandmother told them that she was headed out to check on the cow. She would return shortly. The rain hit the dry red clay in the field and left little oases running down the creek, which now looked like a running river. The cow sure enough had the calf. The calf, black and white calf, was laying under a tree on the east side of the property on the other side of the now riverbank, trying to keep out of the pelting rain. But Daisy was stuck in the mud next to the bank up to her hind knees. "Oh, Daisy, what are we going to do to get you out?" Great-grandmother hooked the lead rope on her lead and pulled till her eyes were about to pop out of the sockets. "This isn't going to work, girl." She spoke to the cow as if it understood. Great-grandmother knew it was wet and rainy to get help in the storm. She also knew that the cow wouldn't last much longer and that the sweet baby needed the mother's milk soon. She did the only thing she knew she could, and that was to get the old tractor out of the barn and pull that cow to safety. She had been on a tractor before, in fact, been raised on a farm herself. The lights in the tractor were dim in the bellows of the rain as she drove down the hill to each cow. The mud was slick and the tires worn out as she kneaded the cow and placed a halter and heavy rope on as she began to slowly pull the cow out. The cow was almost out when it fell back into the mud, buried deeper than before. She was about to give up and seek help from a nearby farmer, but then it gave it one last try. The tractor pulled as hard as the cow mooed louder when all of a sudden the lights on the tractor went out and the engine stalled. The cow pulled with all its might, which caused a chain reaction. The tractor slid down the creek and flipped, and with it went great-grandmother. She lasted only 10 or 15 minutes with the weight of the tractor on top of her, according to the coroner. There was no way to reach Gigi. He would be on the road making his way home at any minute. Preston, the oldest boy, found his mother late that evening after searching for an hour. The tractor still hooked to the cow, but the cow was alive and standing on the bank, with its baby now nursing comfortably by its side. Preston went to the house and called for help. Gigi was devastated and wrenched with guilt. His days and following months were no more than torture to wake each morning. The love of his life was gone, and it was his fault. Gigi's mother took the boys with her for a few months to help Gigi get back on his feet, but Gigi would never be the same. He sold the livestock and all the farm equipment and began his long search. This was a time when there was no internet. This was a time when cell phones were no more than in the imagination of a future inventor. So search for great-grandmother's doppelganger would not be easy, but he did search until 4 years later he had happened upon an article in a statewide newspaper that portrayed a woman with the exact same likeness of his one and only. Gigi did his research and slowly found places where she would be. He got up the nerve to speak with her and eventually told his story. The woman applauded, as well as happily married for 15 plus years with children of her own. At first she felt sorry for him, but as time went on, Gigi's persistence that she should leave her life to be with him, Gigi was thrown in jail. Gigi's father bailed him out and had the charges thrown out, provided Gigi leave the town and never contact the woman again. Gigi went home. He raised the boys with help from his mother and father, but he never forgot great-grandmother or the woman he secretly had pictures of from afar, hidden in his room, of the woman he knew was his long-lost love. Pictures she was not aware were taken. Gigi became a recluse after the boys were grown, if not before. He traveled out only once or twice a month to seek groceries, gas, or new pictures. This story is the basis of a story my mom is working on writing at this time. The end.